The Galactic Council Chamber was a monument to unity, an arena where hundreds of species gathered beneath vaulted ceilings that shimmered with projected star maps. Voices buzzed in countless dialects, each echoing 1,000 years of cultural pride and territorial anxieties. Among the delegation sat the humans, recent arrivals compared to the millennia-old powers. They were watched with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, a species that had risen too quickly for many to feel comfortable with. Their delegation was led by calm, composed envoys, but what drew the most attention was not the diplomats themselves. It was the guards. 2 men and 2 women flanked the humans, standing at ease in plain uniforms. No plasma carbines slung across their shoulders, no vibroblades resting at their hips, not even a ceremonial staff or baton. To the gathered counselors, this absence was not subtle, it was a declaration. In a chamber where the smallest polity armed its honor guard with advanced defensive fields and exotic weapons, humans brought nothing. Their guards carried themselves with confidence, but their empty hands drew derision and whispers across the chamber tiers. Representatives of long-seated powers leaned toward one another, their voices low but dripping with amusement. "Primitive arrogance," muttered a scaled emissary whose people measured prestige by the size of their weaponry. Another clicked mandibles in disdain, remarking that humans were naive to trust the sanctity of the chamber. Some suspected it was an insult, a deliberate flaunting of council protocol. Others interpreted it as weakness, a species so unused to galactic politics that they misunderstood its most basic rituals of deterrence. Even among allies there was unease. A feline dignitary, who had advocated for humanity's membership, could not keep their tail from lashing with irritation. They had urged the humans to adopt at least ceremonial arms, if not for protection then for symbolism. The refusal had been polite but firm. The message was clear: they would come as they were, not as others dictated. Now, under the unblinking gaze of the chamber, that choice weighed heavily. The council's presiding elder finally addressed the delegation, his voice resonating through amplifiers tuned to hundreds of auditory ranges. He welcomed humanity formally, then paused, letting silence stretch before adding an almost theatrical comment about the peculiar choice of arriving unarmed. The words were framed as a question but laced with ridicule, drawing soft laughter from several sections of the gallery. It was a test wrapped in ceremony, a way to pressure the humans into acknowledging what the others believed was a cultural deficiency. The lead human ambassador inclined his head slightly, betraying neither irritation nor embarrassment. His voice carried with calm authority, speaking not to the insult but to the unity the council represented. Yet his guards never shifted, never lowered their gaze, never betrayed discomfort. Their stillness contrasted sharply with the glimmering armor and buzzing field generators of their alien counterparts. That composure unsettled more than a few watchers, though they could not yet articulate why. Across the chamber, minor envoys whispered into recorders, sending commentary back to their homeworlds. Networks prepared quick broadcasts, already framing humans as either foolish idealists or reckless newcomers who thought themselves above established custom. Analysts predicted that this moment would weaken humanity's bargaining position. Few imagined it would be remembered for the opposite reason. Those who studied human history had some inkling, but their voices were drowned out in the wave of laughter and dismissive commentary. They knew of Earth's long record of conflict, of survival against environmental extremes, predators, and their own kind. They knew that the lack of weapons might not mean vulnerability. But knowledge without first-hand witness is easily dismissed. Most in the chamber clung to their assumptions, blind to the possibility that something deeper waited beneath the quiet stance of those unarmed guards. The atmosphere was thick with both arrogance and intrigue. Aliens who prided themselves on centuries of martial tradition smirked at what they saw as youthful bravado. Others, more cautious, noted that humans rarely did anything without intent. For them, the absence of weaponry was not a mistake, it was a statement. But no one could yet grasp its full meaning, because to understand it required more than study. It required demonstration. As the chamber settled into its routine debates, the thought lingered in many minds: humanity had not merely walked into the council unarmed. They had walked in, daring everyone else to wonder why. That unspoken question was heavier than any plasma rifle or ceremonial blade, and though the aliens laughed, they could not completely silence the faint unease coiling in the back of their thoughts. The debates of the day carried on, but the atmosphere had shifted into something taut, brittle with undercurrents of rivalry. Humanity's composure, meant to present dignity, had instead stirred irritation among those who sought any chance to undermine the newcomers. Whispers turned to schemes, and within the chamber's endless corridors of influence, not all voices were bound to diplomacy. Some factions, wary of Earth's rapid rise in trade and alliances, had long prepared ways to test their resolve. To them, the sight of unarmed guards was not a curiosity but an opportunity. It began quietly, unnoticed by most. Members of a species known for their disdain of humans had arranged for mercenaries to slip through auxiliary access ways. These intruders carried concealed disruptors, weapons forbidden within the chamber. The act alone was heresy against council law, but conspirators believed the chaos would shift blame toward humanity. They imagined the humans cowering while their helpless guards fell, their lack of weapons exposed for the galaxy to witness. Carefully seeded rumors had already spread across media relays, ensuring that when the attack came, the narrative would be one of human folly. Inside the chamber, debates were suddenly interrupted by faint disturbances. A scuffle in the galleries drew eyes, then the sharp flash of energy discharges made the entire space shudder with alarm. Delegates gasped and ducked behind ornate barriers, and the air filled with acrid smoke as security fields failed to contain the sudden violence. Alien guards across the chamber reacted instinctively, drawing blades or snapping rifles into firing position. But their haste brought disorder. Energy bolts ricocheted, shattering ornamental panels, injuring bystanders, and escalating panic. The human delegation remained seated, their ambassadors refusing to rise or break composure. Only their guards shifted, moving as one with a precision that was unnerving in its calmness. They formed a living shield around the diplomats, unarmed but unshaken. Where others shouted and scrambled, they simply stood, watching the intruders approach. To the rest of the chamber, it looked like inaction. To the conspirators, it appeared like weakness about to be revealed to the galaxy. Murmurs filled the gallery. Representatives pointed with contempt, whispering that humanity had miscalculated gravely. Some declared the species arrogant to rely on symbols rather than tangible defense. Others, more cynical, claimed it was all an elaborate ploy, that hidden weapons would soon be unveiled. Media drones hovered, capturing every angle for transmission. Predictions and commentary were already being drafted by analysts. Humans crumble under pressure. The attackers moved with confidence, weapons raised, expecting little resistance. Other species guards opened fire clumsily, attempting to defend their delegations, but their energy blasts struck walls, ceilings, even fellow delegates. Panic grew worse, screams rising above the hum of malfunctioning shields. The mercenaries pressed forward, knowing confusion would shield them from reprisal. Their path took them directly toward the human section of the chamber, where the unarmed guards stood waiting. At that moment, perception became divided. To one group of observers, the humans looked cornered, a display of doomed bravado. To another quieter faction, their stillness was disturbing. Trained soldiers, whether alien or human, betrayed their intent in small ways, the tightening of a grip, the shift of posture, the twitch of an eye. But these guards offered nothing. They were statues, entirely sure of themselves. It was this lack of visible fear that began to seed doubt among the more observant witnesses. Yet the majority still mocked. Some representatives even recorded private messages for their governments, assuring them that humanity's status would fall after this public humiliation. Others urged their guards to take positions not to protect humans, but to protect themselves from the collateral disaster they were sure was coming. The chamber, a place meant to symbolize peace, had become an arena of suspicion and opportunism, and humanity stood at the center of it. The mercenaries shouted threats, firing bolts into the air, forcing the sound to echo. They demanded submission, reveling in the chaos they had unleashed. In their eyes, humans were already beaten. They advanced with cruel confidence, weapons gleaming, the supposed proof of superiority. and still the human guards moved only slightly, angling their stance, positioning their bodies in ways too subtle for most to notice. That calm unsettled a handful of alien delegates who knew fragments of human history. They remembered reports of soldiers who had endured without air support, explorers who had survived in hostile terrain without supplies, prisoners who had turned desperation into victory. But their warnings had been ignored in the past, and their silence now was drowned beneath the clamor of fear and laughter. In that chaos, humanity's test was crystallizing. The chamber had been manipulated into believing the humans were unprepared. The mercenaries believed themselves seconds from triumph. And yet, beneath the smoke and panic, the truth had already been decided. The humans had come without weapons not from ignorance, but because they had no need of them. The rest of the council had yet to understand, but the moment of revelation was about to arrive, and when it did, the laughter would die. The mercenaries surged forward, their weapons spitting bursts of energy that carved holes in polished stone and scorched banners representing entire civilizations. Delegates ducked behind cover, their guards returning fire with panicked aim that only added to the destruction. Screams mingled with the shrill crack of plasma bolts, and the chamber became a storm of confusion. Yet amid the chaos, the human guards finally moved, and the nature of their restraint became clear. They did not rush wildly or shout commands. Their motion was precise, measured, and devastatingly effective. The first mercenary who came within reach raised his weapon high, only to have it ripped from his grip in a blur of motion. The human guard twisted the attacker's wrist with such force that bones cracked audibly even over the din, and in the same breath, the disruptor was flipped and disabled. The man crumpled, incapacitated before he could even process what had happened. Another guard advanced into the chaos without hesitation, closing the gap before an alien mercenary could fire. Instead of grappling for the weapon, she pivoted low, swept the attacker's legs, and drove an elbow into his chest. The blow collapsed his armor's seal and stole his breath in one movement. She dragged him down, used his own body to shield her from stray fire, then discarded him as if he were weightless. Every step was smooth, every strike controlled, as though rehearsed countless times for this exact outcome. Observers who had mocked seconds earlier fell silent as they realized what they were witnessing. The guards were not merely defending, they were dismantling professional killers armed with forbidden weapons, and they were doing it with nothing more than their bodies and their training. Where alien guards struggled to contain the crisis with brute force, the humans treated it as routine, each movement honed to perfection. A third guard intercepted two mercenaries at once. The first swung a blade, only for his arm to be caught mid-swing and broken against the human's shoulder. The second lunged with a disruptor, but the guard slammed into him with such precision that the weapon flew across the chamber. He followed with a chokehold that rendered the attacker unconscious in seconds. To the untrained eye it was brutal, to those with military experience, it was discipline incarnate, the embodiment of efficiency. Within moments, the tide turned. The mercenaries who had entered with arrogance now faltered as they realized they were hopelessly outmatched. Their weapons offered no advantage against opponents who closed distances too quickly, who used leverage and environment to turn every surface into a weapon. A chair became a shield, a fragment of railing became a baton, a fallen attacker's own rifle became a blunt instrument. Every item within reach transformed instantly into a tool of control. Panic spread through the mercenaries as they watched their numbers fall one by one. Alien delegates who had mocked humanity only breaths before now pressed back in their seats, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had seen guards fight before, but always with weapons, armor, or augmentation. The humans showed none of that. They were flesh and bone, yet they cut through the armed intruders like predators culling prey. Silence began to dominate the chamber as the violence unfolded with surgical speed. Delegates stopped shouting. Guards of other species lowered their weapons, afraid to be mistaken for threats. All eyes were fixed on the four humans who fought with unwavering precision, their uniforms unadorned, their faces calm. No wasted movements, no unnecessary gestures, just a relentless, clinical dismantling of opponents who had been expected to humiliate them. The last mercenary, cornered and trembling, fired wildly. A human guard closed the distance in a blur, striking the weapon aside and pinning the attacker to the floor with a knee. A single twist ended the fight. The silence afterward was deafening. Smoke hung in the air, broken furniture and stunned enemies littered the floor, but the humans stood unbowed, forming the same protective circle they had held at the beginning. Not one diplomat had been touched. The galaxy had expected panic, weakness, or bluster. What it had received was proof of something far more dangerous. The humans had revealed that they did not need weapons because they themselves were weapons, refined by history, by conflict, by survival. They had chosen to come unarmed not out of naivety, but out of absolute confidence that nothing brought against them could surpass what they already were. The lesson had been written in broken bodies and stunned silence, and no one who witnessed it would ever forget. The chamber lay in stunned quiet after the last mercenary was subdued, the echoes of violence still reverberating in the minds of those present. Smoke curled from scorched surfaces, banners hung in tatters, and shards of broken architecture glittered across the floor. Yet in the center of the devastation, the humans stood exactly as they had at the beginning, surrounding their envoys with unshaken discipline. Their uniforms bore dust and scorch marks, but their formation was perfect, their posture steady, their expressions unreadable. The stillness unsettled the council more than the fighting had. Delegates began to stir, their voices hushed at first. Some whispered accusations, claiming humanity had broken the sanctity of the chamber by concealing forbidden technology within their guards. Others argued bitterly that nothing artificial had been used, that they had seen every movement with their own eyes and recognized the terrifying truth: no hidden weapons, no augments, no external aid. The humans had done it with nothing but their bodies, trained into instruments of absolute control. This realization spread like a chill through the galleries. News drones, still hovering, captured every moment. Already, galactic communication networks were ablaze with footage of the fight. On countless worlds, audiences watched in disbelief as four unarmed humans dismantled a squad of professional killers with brutal precision. Commentators struggled to explain it, inventing theories that humanity had developed unique musculature or that their world bred unusual resilience. Some called it savagery dressed as discipline. Others called it elegance born from centuries of conflict. Whatever the perspective, no one denied the outcome. In the chamber, arguments flared. A reptilian dignitary hissed that such beings had no place in a council of peace, that their very existence as living weapons was a threat. A crystalline envoy countered that the humans had shown remarkable restraint, disabling attackers without allowing their diplomats to so much as flinch. What could be more suited to guardianship than such mastery? Each word carried weight, each opinion shifting the balance of how humanity would be judged in the aftermath. The human delegation remained silent. Their ambassador did not interject, nor did the guards break formation. The lack of defense or justification was itself unsettling, as if the humans had no need to explain what had just transpired. That silence forced others to speak louder, their fear amplifying into heated rhetoric. Some demanded immediate investigation. Others called for sanctions against those who had smuggled weapons into the chamber, though many suspected deeper collusion. Blame spread outward like cracks in glass, but it never touched the humans. For the first time, many realized what true deterrence looked like. Every other species had relied on tools and augmentations, on visible proof of power. Humans had demonstrated that deterrence could be embodied, that the absence of weapons was not weakness but confidence. The thought unnerved even the most powerful civilizations. What kind of species walked into the heart of galactic politics unarmed, daring the universe to test them? And what did it mean that they had passed that test without hesitation? Reports from observers grew more reverent. Analysts replayed the footage frame by frame, noting the flawless execution of every technique. Military strategists sent urgent messages back to their governments, warning that these were not mere guards, but soldiers of a caliber rarely seen. Whispers spread that if this was humanity unarmed, then their armies must be nightmares beyond imagination. The concept of Earth, as a minor player, dissolved in the wake of that fear. Respect, grudging or otherwise, was forced upon them by the undeniable evidence of their capability. The council chamber, once a theater of ridicule, had been reshaped into a hall of uneasy admiration. The laughter that had followed humanity's arrival was gone, replaced by silence heavy with recalculation. Even those who despised humans could not ignore what they had seen. Their attempts to belittle the newcomers had instead elevated them, and now every negotiation, every alliance, every handshake with Earth would carry the weight of the revelation. Though no human spoke, the message was unmistakable. Their guards did not need weapons because humanity itself was a weapon. That understanding lingered in every corner of the chamber, in every nervous glance exchanged between alien delegates. The truth had been demonstrated not through words or ceremony, but through the simple reality of survival. For the first time, the galaxy realized it was dealing with a species that had never needed reassurance in steel or plasma. Humanity's strength was written into their very being, and no one present would forget what they had witnessed. The chamber's uproar finally narrowed into a single question, voiced by a senior delegate whose authority carried weight across dozens of star systems. His tone was neither mocking nor openly hostile, but heavy with unease. He demanded to know why humanity had chosen to bring guardians without weapons, why they had defied millennia of council custom, and why they had displayed such overwhelming lethality in what was meant to be a sanctuary of peace. The words echoed in the still smoldering hall, forcing every gaze to return to the human delegation. The lead ambassador rose, calm as though nothing unusual had transpired. He did not raise his voice or gesture broadly, yet every delegate leaned forward to catch his words. He began by reminding the council that weapons can be stolen, disabled, or turned against their owners. A rifle may jam, a blade may break, an energy field may collapse, but the discipline of the individual cannot be disarmed. Humanity, he explained, had endured countless crises not by leaning solely on technology but by relying on themselves. The guards at his side embodied that principle. They required no visible armament because their training and will were unshakable. His statement was not delivered as boast but as fact, an unadorned truth laid bare. He spoke of a species forged by a world where survival was never guaranteed, where predators once stalked them, where nature itself tested their limits. From those beginnings, humanity had learned that reliance on tools alone was fragile. Strength had to reside within, or it would not endure. The guards had demonstrated this philosophy not to intimidate, but to ensure that no matter what threat arose, the delegation would never be defenseless. The chamber shifted uneasily at his words. Some counselors bristled, interpreting the philosophy as veiled menace. Yet others sat in thoughtful silence, realizing the depth of what had just been revealed. The humans had not come unarmed by accident or arrogance. They had done so to show that their security was not borrowed but inherent. This understanding unsettled many, but it also inspired a grudging respect. For all their pride, most civilizations present could not claim the same confidence. The ambassador continued, pointing out that during the attack, human guards had neutralized their enemies without endangering innocents. In contrast, other delegations' defenders had caused far more collateral damage in their panic. The difference was not in firepower but in restraint and control. To him, that restraint was the true measure of peacekeeping. To carry devastating potential yet wield it with precision, harming only when necessary, was a greater show of civilization than arriving with weapons bristling. A murmur swept through the chamber as delegates absorbed the implications. Some realized that what they had witnessed was not savagery but mastery, not recklessness but intent. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they did not need to brandish weapons to be feared or respected. Their strength was invisible until tested, and when tested, it proved absolute. That revelation altered every calculation, every strategy that had been devised against them. The ambassador's final words were delivered with quiet certainty. Humanity did not bring weapons to council meetings because they did not need them. Their guardians were living proof that true security could never be confiscated, never be deactivated, never be stripped away. With that, he returned to his seat, leaving silence behind. For long moments, no one spoke. Delegates stared at the human guards, no longer dismissing them as ornamental escorts but recognizing them as embodiments of a terrifying truth. Some looked away, unable to hold their composure. Others studied them with newfound caution, realizing that every negotiation with Earth would now be conducted under the shadow of what had been revealed. The balance of perception had shifted irrevocably. That day, humanity gained something no treaty or alliance could secure: respect carved from fear and awe. The guards had not fired a single shot, yet their actions carried the weight of fleets. The ambassador had spoken softly, yet his words echoed louder than any proclamation of power. The galaxy understood that a species that could bring warriors into the heart of the council without weapons was not reckless. It was confident beyond comprehension. And from that moment forward, every decision involving Earth would be made with the memory of unarmed humans who had proven themselves more dangerous than the most advanced arsenal.